Tsunami Warning Center.
Hey! Hey!
Kitty!
A monster wave from across the ocean, and no one saw it coming.
Oh my God!
I came so close to giving up and letting go.
One of the deadliest disasters in history.
As many as 20,000 are dead.
40,000.
150,000.
How often do tsunamis hit?
All the world's oceans and seas have experienced tsunamis.
Where will the next one strike?
We look for areas in which the number of small earthquakes is changing rapidly.
Coming again!
And is something bigger and even more powerful waiting to be unleashed?
That wave is a good 15, 20 feet tall.
From the first quake to the latest questions. The full story of the tsunami that stunned the world. The next wave. Science of tsunamis. Christmas Day 2004, Honolulu, Hawaii. Geophysicist Barry Hirschhorn is on call. At 3 p.m., the beep of his pager cuts his holiday short. An earthquake alert, sent by computers at the unmanned NOAA Pacific Tsunami Warning Center nearby.
I very quickly basically grabbed his shirt and ran out to hop on my bicycle and get over here.
It's up to Hirschhorn and his colleagues to notify the countries of the Pacific Ocean when there's an undersea earthquake, which could spawn a deadly tsunami. More than 7,000 miles away, the sun is rising on the Indian Ocean. From Somalia to Sri Lanka to Indonesia, communities fall into the rhythm of their daily lives, fishing, selling their wares, catering to the thousands of tourists who flock to the sandy white beaches.
I love Thailand. I love the atmosphere over there. I love the people.
For years, Glenn Watson has vacationed in this part of the world, but neither he nor the throngs of tourists and locals around the region have any idea just how fragile their little piece of paradise is.
I've been in a combat situation and never been scared like I was scared at this. I knew I was going to die.
19 miles below the surface of the Indian Ocean, an epic battle has waged for hundreds of years. Two massive tectonic plates, grinding and shifting against each other, have built up energy on an unfathomable scale. The pressure can no longer be contained. At 7:59 a.m., just off the coast of Sumatra, it blows. The earthquake unleashes nearly 10,000 times more energy than the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. On the ocean floor, the smaller tectonic plate rockets up more than 30 feet. All along the 750-mile fault line, the ocean water blasts upward, creating powerful waves on the surface. The waves shoot across the ocean, radiating in all directions at speeds faster than the jet planes flying overhead. In the tsunami's path, every country with a coastline: Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Sri Lanka, India, Bangladesh, Somalia. The people are blissfully unaware of the danger hurtling toward them. But across the world, a race to warn them of the enormous threat is about to begin. Back in Honolulu, Barry Hirschhorn arrives at the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center only minutes after his pager goes off. Colleague Stuart Weinstein, the other geophysicist on call, has already arrived. They have a lot of questions to answer and only minutes to do so.
Where is the earthquake and how big is it? Is it shallow? Is it near a coast? Is it large? And then just issue whatever the appropriate set of messages are.
The bold seismic lines that appear on Weinstein's computer are the first outlines of an earthquake in the Indian Ocean. Not exactly their neighborhood, but impressive nonetheless.
Preliminary magnitude we came out with was an 8.0. Obviously it's a large earthquake.
At 3:14, an automatic bulletin is sent to the Pacific nations on the center's list, notifying them of an earthquake. But the countries of the Indian Ocean aren't part of this warning system, nor do they have one of their own. At this stage, the scientists have no reason for alarm.
But on the other hand, you don't have any sense that this is going to be something that's going to propagate across the Indian Ocean with destructive power.
But as seismic data begin to pour into the center, a far different picture emerges. New numbers indicate the quake is bigger than they at first thought, an 8.5. At 3:45, they call the center's director, Charles McCreary.
When they alerted me that it was an 8.5, that was a little bit alarming because it would have been the largest earthquake in the world in 40 years.
McCreary heads straight to the office. He tells his staff to send out a second bulletin with a revised magnitude. At 8.5, the earthquake is far stronger. Suddenly, a tsunami seems much more likely.
Certainly everybody's glued to the screen and trying to analyze this as best they can. There were 3 of us who were in high gear.
In the Aceh province of southern Indonesia, a violent earthquake tearing apart the ocean floor 155 miles away is shaking buildings to the ground and tossing thousands of people around like ragdolls. Many buildings that survived the initial quake collapse in the aftershock, which follows only minutes later. But the catastrophic chain of events is just beginning for Indonesia. 30 minutes after the earthquake, the first wave of the tsunami reaches the coast. It is a sight many people won't forget.
My lovely sister, you know. I always remember for her.
The first monster wall of water charges on shore, swallowing everything before it. Nowhere else in the region will the waves of the tsunami be higher and reach farther inland. As it races toward the coastline, where the ocean becomes more shallow, the front of the wave slows down. But the back of the wave is still traveling hundreds of miles an hour. It pushes against the front, making it rise up, creating a towering wall of water. Instead of breaking on the shore like a normal wave, tsunamis sweep onto land, engulfing everything in their path. In only 25 minutes, Indonesia is hit with 2 major earthquakes and 3 deadly tsunami waves. The devastation is complete. The historic capital of Banda Aceh is in ruins. The streets are strewn with debris from flattened buildings. Hundreds never had the chance to escape. Indonesia would see the greatest death toll by far. Across the Aceh province, entire villages have been wiped from the face of the earth, along with tens of thousands of people. And the rest of Southeast Asia has no idea what's barreling towards it. They've been able to forecast 90% of the major earthquakes that have hit in the past 3 years. Impressively, including the quake that set off the South Asia tsunami.
We saw the initial reports of the earthquake and we immediately thought of tsunamis and tsunami damage.
Rundle has created maps of hotspots, places where quakes 7.0 or greater could hit within the next decade.
We look for areas in which the number of small earthquakes is changing rapidly, and then we plot those areas where the changes are occurring most rapidly, and that's what these hotspot maps really are.
If that hotspot is underwater, the risk of tsunami is high. Not good news for the West Coast. Number 1 hotspot on his list, California.
2044.9.
But the physicists warn, earthquake and tsunami forecasting isn't precise. And with so much uncertainty, so little warning, and so many lives at stake, the pressure is now on science to find a way to get one step ahead of tsunamis. In the days that follow the tsunami, the images of suffering and loss from the devastated region haunt Charles McCreary and his colleagues.
All of us here at the center have been watching really with horror at the pictures that have been showing up on the news, and the size of this catastrophe is really unprecedented. I can give you some more pics.
They had stretched their knowledge and resources to the limit, but they were always 2 steps behind the monster waves.
If we had a system like the system already operating in the Pacific Basin, in the Indian Ocean Basin, but I think that many, many, many lives would have been saved. It wouldn't have been as bad as it was.
The Pacific Warning System is the only one of its kind, a sophisticated mix of technology, communication, and response that's been in place for 46 years. The U.S. created the system in 1949, after the Hilo tsunami in Hawaii killed more than 150. When a 1960 earthquake near Chile spawned an ocean-wide tsunami, the system went Pacific-wide.
The countries around the Pacific said, you know, we can't let this happen, and so the U.S. offered our center as the operational center for the tsunami warning system in the Pacific.
26 countries around the Pacific Ocean participate, from Peru to Australia to Japan, a nation particularly vulnerable to tsunamis. Here's how the system works. Monitoring stations around the Pacific constantly record seismic activity in the region. Any undersea quake that measures at least a 6.5 prompts an automatic bulletin to the 26 member nations. At higher magnitudes, a tsunami watch, or even a warning, goes out to countries possibly affected. The fear, crying wolf.
There used to be a little bit of educated guesswork. There's a gray line. The line between a false warning and not issuing a warning.
Not every large earthquake creates a tsunami, though the likelihood increases with magnitude. But there are other factors that make this far from an exact science.
You can have a very large earthquake, but if it's deep down inside the earth, there's no possibility of that earthquake causing a tsunami. The earthquake has to be shallow in the Earth's structure in order to be able to deform the seafloor and generate that tsunami.
For coastal communities closest to the epicenter of an earthquake, the only real defense is an educated public. In Hawaii, warning sirens alert people of an impending tsunami.
When a warning comes, people have to know what that is and what it means. It means they need to get inland, and they need to get inland quick.
Tsunamis that form farther out at sea, however, are much easier to monitor and warn against. Out in the open ocean, a network of 100 surface buoys measures ocean levels. But in recent years, 6 new deep-sea sensors on the ocean's floor allow scientists to track tsunamis with far greater accuracy. These bottom sensors, attached to surface buoys, actually weigh the amount of water on top of them. When a tsunami passes over them, these sensors can measure even a tiny change.
They're essentially sending the signal to the buoy using sound waves, and then the buoy itself has a satellite transmitter on it.
The Pacific Warning System is far from perfect. It still takes hours to identify a tsunami, and many coastline communities are too remote to be warned quickly.
Our warnings are very limited. We tell people that we expect a dangerous tsunami, and we give them an arrival time, but that's it.
But any warning is better than none at all. A tsunami can't be stopped, but technology can help people get out of the way. McCreary envisions a worldwide tsunami warning system.
Our ultimate goal would be, when we have an earthquake and we can measure the tsunami, we want to be able to make forecasts. We want to tell people in different communities, the wave is going to arrive at this time, you're going to have 3 destructive waves, The waves are going to be approximately this high, and you're going to have this much inundation along your coastline.
For McCreary and his team, the catastrophe has one small silver lining. Tsunami is no longer an unfamiliar word. The destruction it can leave in its wake is now understood by the entire world. It is the first step toward change. But in the aftermath of one of the worst natural disasters in recorded history, global attention is on the immediate relief of those suffering. More than 150,000 lives destroyed instantly. The impact will be felt for generations. For one of the lucky ones, Glenn Watson, homecoming is bittersweet.
I'm just so proud that he's my grandpa then.
Watson's own grandchildren are sharp reminders of the boy he saved and the mother that he couldn't.
I keep thinking, I can't get that woman going by. I can't get her out of my mind because I felt so helpless I couldn't save her too.
During those terrible moments, Watson put his life on the line for another. And there are countless other stories of heroism and tragedy. The tsunami will reshape an entire part of the world. It is a loss so enormous, it defies comprehension. A force of nature testing human nature. And a chance for the world to rise to the challenge that awaits it.